Hey everybody, Dave Lawrence from the California Type Foundry. I've been getting requests just to show the whole process of spacing and kerning a font. So in this series, we're going to be looking at how to do the spacing. So now, just to give you an idea of the different types of things you have to space, first thing is the vertical metrics. Now these are the lines that you see in FontLab, and this vertical metrics are about how one line of text relates to another. Okay, now that's for the entire font. Now just for one letter, you have the metrics. This is the LSB, which is the left side bearing, is a space on the left side of the letter. The RSB is the right side bearing, that's a space on the right side of the letter. And usually when we're talking about spacing or metrics, this is what we mean. Now, sometimes there's confusion. This is not the same thing as kerning, because kerning is when you have two letters next to each other, and you, for example, the A and the V, if you just have the side bearing, they're going to be too far apart. So then you put some negative space. So this minus 85 is only going to apply to the A and the V of that font. And then you have more in-depth things such as context kerning, and that fixes triples. This is a frequent pairing that you'll see, and if you don't do the context kerning, then the L will hit the A. There's also, in programs, you've seen things like tracking. Tracking, what it does is it adds a certain value on top of the spacing you already have, and so tracking is more of what your user would do, and usually you don't track your own font. Okay, first thing we're going to do is get your screen set up for spacing. Go up to Window, Workspaces, and then we're just going to hit Default here. We don't really need the fonts one because we're not going to be spacing multiple fonts. Layers and masters we probably don't need because we're just going to space one master. So I'm going to take each of those off. Now here's the panels we're going to add. We're going to get the preview panel, and I have it up here like this, so that way we can type in the letters and we can see how they're spaced horizontally. So that's why I like it like that. Now let me think here. Oh, glyph. A lot of spacing can be done really well in the glyph panel, so I'm just going to stick that to the side here. Okay, so here we are. We're going to start with an empty font that has no letters and no spacing. Instead of actually drawing something here, since this tutorial is not about that, I'm just going to copy from a font that I already made. So first thing, one thing you might want to make first is the N. So I'm just going to copy this here. So you do your drawing, you draw the N, and now it's here. Okay, so to get to the spacing controls, you can push this button up here that says Edit Metrics, or you can push M. Another thing you can do is if you double click in here, and then in the View panel, you can do spacing controls, you can put this on, and sometimes I actually just like to do this inside the drawing so that way I can redraw some different things there. So what I want to do with this one is I have a black, but that's already spaced sort of loosely for sort of subheader and text sizes. So those are the smaller sizes. Text sizes are going to be from about 9 to 13 points. Subheaders are sort of from the 14 to 22-ish and 23, and then displays are anywhere from 20 and above or 24 and above. Okay, so you do this, so you sort of decide what am I going to use this for, and since I want to use this for a display, I can put narrower spacing here. So let's put on our waterfall. So we have our waterfall on, we get an idea of how it looks. Now there are going to be some rounding errors just because the resolution of the screen is not going to be as good as printing. So one way that you might want to do spacing is sometimes I just actually step back from the computer like several feet, and then you can sort of see how the spacing looks. So without any rounding errors, because the angle of resolution becomes sort of higher the farther back you go. So, okay, so here we have the N. Okay, so that's good. So now there's two ways you could go when you're drawing the letter. You could do the O next, the lowercase o, or you could do the H to sort of relate the uppercase to the lowercase. Here, I think what we're going to do is we're going to do the O. I'm going to copy this over. So this is what you would actually do by drawing, right? So now let's put the N's next to each other and then the O's over here. So we can see that this is not good because the space between the O's looks much larger than the space between the N's. So in order to match this spacing, which is pretty tight, the O's almost have to go next to each other. And we might even want to change the design so they're a little bit more condensed. This space here and this space here. Okay, so let's drag this in a bit. For a text, this is much too narrow. Okay, so let's see that. So that's looking better. You can see at small sizes, the O's are getting close to touching. What I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the space inside this. So that's 169. Let's go to the N. And let's see what that is. 135. Usually you need a little bit more space inside the O because when it's closed like this, it needs a little bit more. But I'm going to just see what happens if I take 10 out of the middle there. Okay, so let's change this to 23. Okay, I like that a little bit better, but since I don't really want to change all the letters of this font, we're just going to still leave it at where it was. Okay, so that way I don't have to change like the G, because once you change the width of something, you have to change it for everything. So we're just going to leave it around there. In the 20s is about the lower limit, unless you're going for super tight spacing, like almost touching spacing. And this is pretty tight. It's sort of reminiscent of like 70s and 80s sort of design. So spacing styles change. So it just depends on what you like and what feels good for you. I had a looser spacing for the original, like this, which is better. See, things don't quite look like they're colliding as much. But since I wanted to do something different for this spacing, that's why I'm doing it tighter. And then, of course, the person can adjust it a little bit, but it's hard to, say if I do the tracking on a font like this. Okay, watch what happens. FontLab also allows you to check your tracking, which is another thing that I sometimes do when I am looking at things at this stage, because I want to see how things, if someone wants to track this tighter, see what happens. Okay, and this is actually sort of a cool spacing where we could make the N really tight together like this. But then we would have to add more space for the O. We'd probably want to condense the O a little bit so it didn't look so wide when the spacing is that tight. Okay, that's at minus 50. Let's see, minus 25. Oops, that's 25 positive. Okay, minus 25 would give us this. And so that gives you an idea. If you don't have enough space between the O's, then that doesn't allow your user to really track it too much. Then now you can do your H and your capital O. And sometimes I'll do the entire lowercase and space that first and then do the uppercase later. If you're just starting out, it's just tricky. There are so many things that you need to think about. I would probably do at least one uppercase, at least the H and maybe the O. So that way we just get an idea of, do we have the right height? How do these things look together? And anything can always be changed later, but it is a little bit easier if you get the relationship between the caps and the lowercase right the first time. So now, obviously, I'm just copying out of the font. You would draw this, draw the H. So now let's put the H's next to each other and then put the N's next to each other. Okay, so now we can see that this doesn't really match because the H has the much looser spacing. So what we'll do is we'll make this equal to N, but we're usually I put an equal sign here. Sometimes it's not necessary. Sometimes it's actually changes your result a little bit. So let me multiply by 1.1. Okay, so this would give us a little bit larger side bearing than the N. That's looking better. Let's now go to the other side. So this one's a little bit different. One thing I can do is I can just put a bar. So I'm pushing shift, then backslash to get the bar. And then I put that and it makes the other side equal to that. That's not too bad. And this might get refined as we go further, but something like, 1.05 to 1.1, which is 105, 110% side bearings of the N. That usually works pretty well. Okay, so now then you draw the O. Okay, and we're just going to put it in there. So now we're going to look at the O's together. Let's do the cap O's. Okay, so let's make this metrics link here. So on the O, we're going to put equals O, lowercase o times 1.1. So we'll just try doing that same basic thing, and then we'll set the sides equal. Since O is a symmetrical in this font, then we're going to set that equal to the other side. Okay, so now we can see that's what this looks like together, and we can go down to C. That's looking similar. And what's weird about spacing is because of spatial frequencies, if you sort of soften your gaze and harden your gaze, it sort of changes a little bit about how this looks. So now let's go to putting the H's together with the O's. So let's put H here, O here, and sort of see how that looks. The O's look too sort of wide for me for this font, but I don't want to change. Usually I would change the design here. Okay, the O's are looking too wide, so I'm going to go in here. I'm going to move this over. And what's sort of nice is the side bearing is going to change as you change this. Now my curve tension looks too low, so I'm going to change this maybe up a little bit, a couple percentage, and see that's looking a lot better. Okay, maybe we are going to change the designs as we go through, just because we wanted to show you how it actually we space things. So we're going to make this. Let's take a look at the O, the lowercase o. Now we're going to highlight the inside, and we're going to increase the curve tension of there. And what I'm doing is I'm putting view tuning lines is on, and then I have like a shortcut on my mouse, so I forget. Oh yeah, edit tuning lines, which is here in contour, edit tuning lines. So I did that to add a little bit more space to the inside. Okay, so where you go from here can sort of vary. One thing I wanted to show you with the side bearing for the N. Sometimes you make this the right side, since it has this curve and it's more open here. A lot of times you make that a little bit less than the left side, which is an entire straight line, so it's more closed. Here I made it 5 different. Usually I won't make it quite that much. Now this type of nuance is not going to be seen for text sizes, so in that case you might just want to set both sides equal to whatever the number is, like 60. You can adjust what you see in your waterfall by going up here and clicking the gear. Right now I have it going all the way up to 240. Yeah, I sort of like that for this tutorial because it depends on the size of screen. That might actually look pretty small still. So what do we do next? Well, we could do the M and things like that. I would probably do just sometimes I like to do some easy ones, so that way I feel good, like, ooh, I made some progress. So I'll just design the L based on the left side of the N, and then I'll design the I, which is, a simpler letter. So that way I feel like, okay, I got some progress here. So now we set each of those equal to the N, the left side, right? Because that's the one that has the straight part to it. So I put this equal to N, then I use the bar again to say, make this equal to the left side of the L, because we want that symmetrical. Now the I, this is a little bit different, and it depends on whether, how this looks. Okay, things are a little bit misaligned here. So I'm just going to line them up using the highlighting this, and then you can use the transform to align right here. Okay, so originally the dot was a little bit bigger than this thing here, but now I'm making them the same. Let's set those equal to N. And you can also do this all at the same time if you already have an alphabet made out, then you can highlight a bunch of letters here. Like I could highlight the L, which I probably should have shown, and then set that equal to N, and then that will do both of those at the same time, save some work. Okay, so now in our screen up here, let's take a look at what this looks like. And then N, I, you can sort of do this where you put it in between those, and see it looks really nice. Now, of course, this side bearing is a little bit closer. These are a little bit closer on this side by about 3 or so, but it looks pretty nice and even. Another sort of easy one to do if they have similar shapes are the B and the D and the P and the Q. So let's copy those over, and you'd be drawing these out. One would be, okay. It's nice to do these because this is sort of a mixture of the L and the O. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to sort of compare the widths here. So once we had changed this down, then that we need to pull this in, and we also have to change the tension over here. These are balanced curves. I don't do balanced as much anymore, but balancing sort of makes it easier to see that everything is just 64. Okay, I'm having trouble. Zoom in if you're having trouble getting the right value. Okay, 64. Okay, there we go. And let me just check one thing. Sorry, font. I'm going to this. Sorry, let me do it through the slow way. Info button here. I don't want to round, so I'm taking that off. A lot of people use the rounding, but that's why I was having trouble getting the right curve tension, was because it was sort of rounding it here. And so to have nicer curves, doing it unrounded is helpful, but it does make the rectangles harder to sort of deal with. Okay, so now let's set all the side bearings equal. So I go to things that have this sort of the same side bearing on the sides, and that's the B and the P. They have the same on the left. So we're going to set that equal to the N equals N. And then we're going to set the right side equal to the O equals O, the lowercase. Okay, enter. Okay, so now those... Did I undo? I did something on the end, and now it's wider spacing. We'll get that back. Yeah, we'll get that back. Okay, now for the P, the D and the Q, we're gonna set O on the right. Oops, O, not 0. And then we're gonna set the opposite side of N on the left. So how you do that is you push the bar and then you push N. Okay, so now let's, we're going to do a edit. We're going to do, font and update glyphs. Oh, this does have live update on, so that's going to update the metrics, all those links that we had. Okay, so now we can check out how these look. D, P, Qs. Okay, so you can also get an idea for how your color is. Now that's the shade of gray that you have by looking a little bit farther away from your computer and seeing, does a bunch of N's, does that look a lot darker than a bunch of O's? At smaller sizes, the O looks darker. At larger, actually, the N looks a little bit lighter at the small sizes, but when it's big, the N looks darker. So it's It's always a balancing act. It's hard to get it exact. Let's finish up making the squarish letters. Okay, now for when you're making the U and spacing the U, let's put this here. Let's set the side bearings of this thing. Since it's reversed, remember we have to use the opposite sides of the N. So I push this N, and usually I use the equal sign, and then I'm going to copy that over into the other side bearing. What did I do wrong here? Let's try deleting this. Oh, I accidentally had a space in there, I think. Okay. Oh, there's a layer problem. Okay, let's delete that. Let's open up a new layer. Okay, now I'm going to add the element reference. Let's try doing that again, see what happens. Okay, so let's just set this equal to N, see if we can do that. 0. Okay, we're going to open up the layers and masters panel. Okay, that says regular. That says black. Oh, shoot, because I was copying that in. Okay, so what we're going to need to do is we're going to have to change the master name to black. So this is a good thing to know because sometimes this type of stuff happens. Okay, go over to masters. This is called regular. Let's actually do it over here. Let's change the name to black. Okay, build the names. I'm going to change the weight over here to black. This is something that I should have done earlier. But if you just see build names, okay, now it's black. This is a regular style. Since you only have one font, you want to leave this as regular, even though it's a bold. This is something that's sort of for legacy systems and for Microsoft products where they have 4 members of a family. So this has to be regular if you only have one, even if this is black like we have it. I didn't change the master name down here. Okay, there we go. Hit OK. Now, okay, good. Now this is bold. Bold means that it's a master. So now the U has the right master. Okay, so now let's go in here. So that was a problem because in the original, this was called black, but then in this one I had it left it as regular, so it wasn't working. Okay, so now the metrics links should work. So since the U is sort of letting more light in, it looks a little bit lighter than the N, we're going to use a delta filter to close that up a bit. So that way it's still linked to the N if we change it, but it's let me try to remember. This has a special way. I think we link this side. Let's try that. Let's try moving this over by maybe 5, 10. Delta filters can be a little bit tricky because knowing which one side to move. Did I move it the correct way? I think I moved it the wrong way. If it's flipped like that, you have to move it sort of backwards in order to get it to the right direction. Okay, so yeah, just checking that. That is looking better. It's looking more even. Maybe the U looks too dark. If you think so, then just adjust that there. Oh, and let's set the other side is not equal. So let's set this correctly, which is the equals the opposite side of N. So we use bar. Means opposite side equals the opposite side of N. Okay, so let's check that out now. Okay, it looks pretty good. Okay, close that out. Look at it, the big size. Yeah. Okay, so sometimes what I'll do is I'll put a green label on these things if I think it's done to where I like it. Green flag. Okay, now let's copy the M over. So the M is sort of a weird one because you would think since it's more black stuff in here, you think you would have it spaced out more than the N. But actually to make it not too wide, you want the space inside usually is a little bit less. Here it's less by 3. Okay, 95, 95. Okay, those are good. Okay, so let's copy the R. Copy the R. Over here, copy the A, which one we want. I'm just going to use this style. We're going to copy. So this is, you would be actually designing this, right? And sometimes I do the G. If it's this style of G, I design it with the B's and the P's and all that. Try to design similar things at the same time. Then there's less checking back and forth because you sort of remember your numbers and your widths and all that stuff. Okay. Did we do the C already? Okay, copy the C over and the E. So we'd sort of do the C and the E together. Actually, let's space some of these before we go any farther. Sorry. Okay, so the E and the C are usually going to take the left side bearing of the O. So let's put that equal to the O. Okay, put that there. And if you want to see any of your letters, one thing you do is you put NN and then use @ symbol NN. Okay, and that sort of allows you to see how it looks in between there. So remember that, and then we'll put some O's at OO at OO. We did condense the O a bit, so we should do that with the E. So I'm going to do power nudge by holding down C, holding down Shift, move it in by 10, okay? The right side we still have to do of the E. Since this is pretty circular here, you want to make it about the same as the O. So I'm going to put equals O. Okay. So then we look at this here. It looks a little bit open because of this space here, so we're going to subtract a little bit from there. Let's subtract a 3 or something. Oh, wait. You know what? It's because my O value is wrong. Okay, let's make that equal to the opposite side. Okay, there we go. That's better. Now we're going to do an update. Okay, so the C is a similar thing. If we set this equal to O, let's just set the C equal to O on the right side. It still looks a little bit spacey since you have more of a gap here. And so the distance between the O and the C is larger because there's nothing there. So we're going to subtract something like a 6 from that. Another thing you can do if you want to think in percentages, you can do times 0.9. So that would be 90% of the side bearing. Whoops. Oh, I was sort of messing around with my keypad, so it's not working right. I was like remapping keys. Okay, so I'm going to label those green. Let's label green, since that we have a bunch of stuff now. I'm going to label green the stuff that we had already spaced. This we spaced, this we spaced, and these two. So we have to do, and these two. Okay, so now we have to do the A. Since the A sort of has a similar side to the N, you can see here that it has similar, depending on how your font looks, if it can take the same side as the N on the right. Okay, so this side we can make a fraction of the O, so we put the equals O times, let's try like a 0.85. Let's look up here. See up here, you can tell that it's spaced closer, but there's still, you want to sort of compare this here where the N meets the O and where the A meets the N. And so let's look at its smaller sizes, see how it is. It might even still look a little bit spacey. So we'll just put it at a 0.8 and we'll just do that for now. But yeah, I'm really liking how this is looking so far. Okay, so let's hit green on that. Let's go now to the R. So pretty obviously we put equals N on the left. Now we're going to save the right side for later because that one's tricky. The G is pretty simple. You're going to put O on the side. So we're just looking for similar shapes. Since this is similar to the D and the O, we're just going to put that equal to O. And then the other side, we're going to put equal to the opposite side of N, since it's straight on that side. And you can see it looks pretty good. Okay, so let's now space the jutting letters. And these are the letters that sort of poke into other ones. Let's see. So I don't think we have the F in there. So we'll put the F. You would just be designing this like we talked about. We would do the T and the J. Okay, so first of all, we want to let's just do the J compared to the I. So I'm going to push both of these, push enter, make sure that the dot is the same since we did change how it is. I'm going to do an align and an align over here to make sure that it's the same. Okay. And for text fonts, usually you may have to make the dot a little bit bigger, otherwise it just looks tiny. See here, it's really hard to tell. The dot became really small. So now there's a couple ways you could do this. It sort of depends on preference. A lot of times I like to put T's next to each other to see how it is. Okay, so for example, we might make this, let's try a 15. Let's say it's a 15 on both sides. And okay, so you see what happens when you make it close like that is that this gap between the T's sort of disappears when you get to a small size. See how now they're just stuck together. So some people actually make it like that where stuff is more touching. For a display font, I think that's okay. Usually I would add more space in between there. Let's now do the F and set that equal to the T on both sides, equals T, equals T. Now let's see N, T, N, O, T, O, N, F, N, O, F, O. Okay, so we're just doing that to compare. Now, obviously, there's going to be some gap in between the O because this would need kerning, and we talked about how when two things have their side bearings like this, we need to close this gap a little bit. Seems like we need more on the right side of the T. Okay, so let's put it up by 10. Another thing you can do is if you have this by 15, add a 10 there, and then push like that. And if you have the equal sign, it will hold this number. So that's a great thing to do, to know sort of what you started with and then know where you're going. So obviously that looks like too much. Let's try 5, hit enter, so that now we're at a 20. And I'm comparing this space to this space here. And even though it's less, it still looks like it's a little bit more, right? So let's go to 3. Let's look down. Now let's put some T's together to see how the gap is looking. Okay, so we lose the gap here at, what is that? So I'm going to go up here to my gear to see what, we lose it about 12 points. I think that's okay because it's 16 and higher, we're looking pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to put green on that. F, let's put those together and see how we look. Okay, that needs, well, okay, so the reason why this is looking different is because notice that the top is closer than the bottom part down here, which is a 29, 18, 29. So if we want to sort of make the gap, we can change our design, which is to pull this out here to get rid of that gap. Or we can use kerning, or we can subtract from the right side of the F. So those are our 3 options that we have in order to get rid of this gap. T, we do have a little bit of difference, is 18. Oh no, this is 18 and 18. So the T is lined up here, but the F is not. And that helps, since these two things are really close together, making this a little bit shorter helps get rid of how dark this looks up here. Whereas the T, this is already spaced really far apart, so it doesn't matter quite as much. Okay. Another thing to look at is that this is a 58, this is a 61, so I want a little bit longer on the F, and that can actually be longer than the other one, but we'll just set it at 61, so now those are equal on this side. I tend now to make this side a little bit longer, so we're going to put it up a little bit like that. Okay. Let's see what it looks like next to the L. L, L, F, L, L, T, L, L, T, L, L. Okay, so now let's look down farther here. I think we could take a little bit off the side bearing of the F on the on the right. So let's do a -3. So we did F -3. This side looks just so big. There's so much space there. That's why the F is a bit harder to do. Let's try -5. I made a little bit of a change here. See? When it's big, you can notice that this is different than this, though. I don't know. That's a tricky one. So what I would sort of do is play around with that, check that out, and see what I could do to get that looking a little bit better. Okay, green that. The R we can make equal to the equals the T. We could also make it equal to the opposite side of the T. So let's do the opposite side of the T. Oops. So that way, that's the smaller side. Okay, now let's put the NN at NN, OO at OO. Sorry, I'm bouncing back and forth. You can also do this in a little bit more organized way where you have whatever up here. Yeah, I'm liking how that looks. See how the R and the N look together? This, you know, it's like you can tell that it's smaller, but it feels like it's the right thing next to the N there. It's sort of, this extra gap sort of opens up the lightness on that side. Okay, good. I'm just going to refresh on there's a couple tricks you can use for the J. The J is sort of annoying because watch, if I just put this equal to, like, we want this side sort of equal to the N. See how this is too much? But if I just set this equal to the N, that doesn't really work. And why is that? It's measuring from right down here, but we don't want it to measure from down there. We want to measure it from here. So, okay, let's take a look at the J. So for this one, you have to do it a little bit differently since, of course, technically you measure from this down here, which is the closest point to the side. But really we want to measure from up here. So what we do is use this metrics line. You go up to view, line, metrics line up here, and now into this we can input the value for N. So if I put an N in here, it says it's 40. And it used to, if you put an N in here, it used to change to the value. But anyways, so now we're going to put a 40 into here, and it's going to change this purple number to 40, and then the black number is going to change to something different. Okay, so now the J looks a lot better. It has the same side bearings as the left side of the N. Okay, good. So the J is done. Okay, so that's green. Another thing that I remembered while we were going is that I forgot to change the C, the inside of the C. I think it's too wide now. So we're going to pull that in by 10 and then also change the curve tension in there like we had been doing. Oh, when it's like this, it's a little bit trickier to change the curve tension. So let's go zoom in. I think we had it like a 64. This one is a little bit trickier to change because I can pull this out a little bit, but the shape might not look as good. We're probably just going to do it the simple way this time, like that. Okay. So those are the tuning lines, and you can get those by going to, oh yeah, there it is. It's just because we're out. Contour, edit tuning lines. Just because we're out of the glyph window, the drawing window. Okay, it's going well. Now we're going to get all the diagonal stuff put in here. We're going to put in the K. We're going to put in these are nice because they're all in a row. VWYXK. And the Z is a little bit different from either of those, actually. So we'll leave the Z and the S for after. Okay, so the K, obviously we can set the left side equal to N. And then the right side is a little bit based upon the X. Okay, so let's figure this out. Okay, so we have the V here. So he takes a minimum size, and sometimes people even put this at negative. Now, obviously, you couldn't, in the days of mechanical type. You couldn't put the at negative because that was impossible. So they would at least have to, so the smallest you could put this at was 0. So let me actually put some V's in a row as well here. So the smallest you could put it was 0. So let's put this at a 0 here and a 0 on the other side. Okay, but now you can see that they're touching here. And legibility for a display font, that sort of looks cleaner and nice. But from a legibility point of view, if you just glance at this and you see maybe just 2 of them, it almost looks like a W, right? If you just see those there, okay, it's a little bit W looking. Okay, so that's so having 0 or negative for the V side bearing will, in my opinion, makes it a little bit too much like a W. So you can, if you put something, especially for sans, if you put something positive, and we have pretty small side bearing, so let's just do a 6. And what I'm gonna do is hit these side things. See, these means bound, so that just puts an equal sign in front of it. And all that the bound side bearing does is that means if I pull this out, the side bearing then adjusts. If you don't have this on, let me show you without the link. You push this one way, see, it didn't adjust. So it didn't do too much. Okay, so usually I use bound side bearings, but if you use it on the left side, then things can sort of bounce around. See, watch, go like this, then. and I prefer that to not having it bound, but yeah, that's just personal preference. So if I have the V like this, you can see that it's close up here, but they're not touching. Another strategy, and there's many ways to do the same thing, is you could take the V, say if we put this at negative, let's just try -5, okay, -5, -5. Then, even though that this is touching here, what we can do is in the kerning stage, which is, we're not really going to cover in this particular series, just about space, and then I can then put a gap of whatever, like a 15 in there. So now there's going to be 5. So now it's going to be 5 in between the V's. See, this is a space of just 5 down there. Okay, so that's another thing that we can do. And actually, I sort of like that way for this, which is leave it negative side bearing, but then add space when the V's are next to each other. Okay, so I'm going to leave this, well, I'm going to delete the kerning, I guess. I don't know. Sometimes when I'm doing this, if I have a special kerning that I want to do like that, I do leave it during the production stage, even though usually it's a step you do after. But if it's part of the design, sort of like it is here, then maybe we want to keep it. Okay, so now that we have the V set up, and sometimes you can have different side bearings on each side of the V, depending on the design, and serifs, since one side is darker and one side is lighter, a lot of times I'll do that. But for this, not really. Okay, so each of those equal to -5. So then we set the W equal to the V. Now, the W can take a greater value than the V if you were looking at the area here, because look at the area. Let's go up to the big one. Look at the area here between the N and the W, this triangle. Now look when I go to the V, that triangle became a lot bigger, right? So for text fonts, you want you care more about this white space, has to be more even for the reading. So in that case, you're going to make it, you're going to make the W have a larger side bearing so that this is closer to what the V has. And you know what? Let's just put them right next to each other. NVN, NWN. Okay, so see, this triangle here is smaller. So if this was a text font, we'd want to equalize those more by making this bigger. And the W just usually has different angles on its sides. However, since this is a display font and I want to optimize and consider these spots in between the see this spot here in between the N and the W, I care more about those close spaces rather than the areas. We're going to leave it like that. We're going to just set it equal to V. So I'm going to put green here. Okay, Y, same thing. If this, we go and look, and this is not blocking like the J did. If it is, then you have to do a similar thing to the J. But you put the metrics line up here at the X height. Okay, but since this one's like that, we can just set this, the Y equal to V. Oops, I did uppercase V. Lowercase, lowercase. Okay, N at, oops, at and N. Okay, and then at V and N. So we can do that to sort of compare our diagonal things. We can put them together like that. It gives us a little, this is called context. When you have these other things around, it can give you an idea of how things compare to each other. And the V with the Y, that looks good. It's exactly the same space over here. This is a little bit different triangle, but it looks good. Okay, green. Now going over to the X, see this looks very spacey compared to the V. Sometimes I'll just set the space equal to V. But if we look at this here, see that's looking a little bit too tight, because look at since X has these diagonals pointing at the top and the bottom instead of just at the top, it tends to look a little bit more crowded. So we might want to do a V plus 10. We don't really want to do a V multiplied by something, because that would sort of mess up because -4 times like 0.9 wouldn't work. So in these negative things and for very small things like the X, we're just going to add a little bit onto the V metrics. Okay, so that looks a lot better to me. You can also make, usually this thing up here, so usually these are a little bit more equal on the left, and this side's, let me show you in the big thing. Okay, see how there's only a gap of something like 19 there. Actually, I made them pretty equal on this side. Usually this side is going to be a little bit closer and this side's a little bit farther, so you can have a little bit less on the right of the X. There's just little things like that you might notice about how you design things, and then that you can put that into the side bearings as well. Okay, moving along, we have the K. Just set that equal to the X. Okay, so that's going to give us a pretty good thing since that's similar, but usually the top is a little bit farther back, so you can do an X minus. Let's do an X minus like 3 or something. Okay, and then we can, instead of the V here, we'll put in the X. So we compare the different sides of the K. That looks a little bit better. It does look like there's a ton of space on this side of the K and not so much there. But this does help the diagonals equalize with the V. We can always subtract if we want. I think that's pretty good. See, it's starting to look like one shape as you get smaller. Okay, put green on that. The last one is the S, and that one is sort of hard. Let me show you the things that you need to consider with that. Okay, so when you look at the S, the traditional way of making it, let me get this here. The traditional way of making it is that you have this is down here is your farthest point, but down here is your farthest point. So on the round part on this side is the farthest, but here this pointy part is the farthest to the left. So that makes it really difficult to space, because what do you look at when you're trying to space the S? Do you look at this thing down here? Do you look it up here? Do I compare this round part here to this round part down here? And what do you do? And if you make all those things equal, the S just doesn't look good. So that's why he's difficult to do. And actually, I'm going to condense him a little bit. So what I'm going to do is use my delta filter. I'm going to set this side to solid to keep that stroke equal, and then I'm going to move this over by, like, we move the O, we condense the O by 10, so I'm going to move this over by something like 6. Okay, then I'm going to apply the filter, and now let's try spacing it. So it has to definitely have a lot of space, not too much spacing there compared to what we have. So let's just start by putting equal amount, 10 on each side. Actually, that doesn't look the worst, but you can sort of see, look, this part looks really close, this part looks really far away. So a lot of times you want to put the, add 10 onto the right. So a lot of times you want to put the right a little bit more than the left. And that's actually not too bad. Still, it looks maybe a little bit wide on the right now. And really a change, it's like, I don't know if it's like those magic, I don't know if you know those magic books where you sort of soften your gaze and you see a picture, and then if you harden it, you just see a bunch of patterns. That, you know, 3D, magic 3D books. Doing this is sort of like that. It's like if you soften your gaze, then it looks better, and then if you harden your gaze, sometimes it looks worse, and it's sort of shifty like that. I guess it is an S. It's an S sort of like a snake. It's really hard to space. But I think we're pretty good there. Let's just measure this. That's a 25. This is a 16, so there's not too much difference between those. Here, this is a 35. This is really close. That's a 10. So yeah, very asymmetric shapes are harder to balance. But we'll call that guy done. Okay, great. Oh, wait, the Z. And then we're done with the lowercase. Okay, Z has that same problem as the S, except the sides are flat. See, this side is far, this part is closer, this side is farther. Usually I make this a function of the T, so maybe I'll do the T, maybe, let's try saying it just equal to the, actually just the right side of the T. So what I do is I put the bar down here to show that it's the other side, so that's the right, and then since this is already the right, that's the same as the right side of the T. And the reason why I want that is because the T has two things on that side, sort of like how the Z has. So it's not the worst. I mean, we can add a plus a little bit if we want to. Oops, that's an equals. Let me do a plus. Then I'll copy this plus 2 over. For some reason I'm not getting, the mouse is not working quite right there. Okay, so that's the Z. Okay, so as we're doing the uppercase, the order that you do it, it can sort of depend on what your goal is. If you're looking for sort of similarness, and you can do the simple first, but if you want, sometimes I like to start with a complex thing like a G or an R, because that is going to give you sort of more DNA of what your font looks like doing a more complicated shape. For this one, we're just going to sort of go from simple to complex, though. But it's not always the best to just do that. Okay, so I'm going to paste in the I here. So we're going to set that equal to H. But I'm going to say that we're going to design all the simple stuff. So that's going to be the L. You can remember that by the word left, like that. And that can help you remember which letters to do. The E and the F are next to each other, so I can copy them at the same time. The T, copy, and the Z. Z is a sort of weird one. I like to, it is actually more closely related to the E than it is to like the V or the K or X. And it's related to the N as well. But so I usually like to do that when I'm doing the E and the F and all those. Okay, let's actually say we design those. Now we're going to design burped. So that is BRPD, burped. And that can help you remember what to do next. The reason why we're going to put all these here is because the fastest way, we would sort of be spacing these, and as we're going, we set each side equal to H. So that way we're testing out this. We're doing this a little bit quicker now. We've had a lot of these videos. So let's see, anything else have a straight side there? The K, we're not going to do that one now. So what we're going to do is select all of these guys, make sure not to select the H, and we're going to set the left side equal to the H because it is like that on there. Okay, Now, however, and sometimes you can mark this, maybe we mark this with a blue saying that we did the, oh, I forgot the L. Let's set him equal to H. Mark with a blue saying we did the left side, okay? Now, the I, we're going to set the right side also equal to H. So we can just set that there. Now we can put him green. The other ones are not quite right. So for the D, that one's easier. We can set that equal to O because it's going to have a pretty similar side. So let's put in our context here, HH at HH. You can also go through here and put those there. Put the context when you hit this here in content. Sometimes it's a little bit too much information and all. Let me see. Sometimes you can change this type of thing in texts here. No. Anyway, sometimes that's a little too much information for me, so I'm just going to go back to our custom way of doing it, and also the waterfall. Oh yeah, and that one doesn't quite work with the waterfall either. Okay, so for the P, it needs to be a fair amount of space like the O. But you can see all this gap. That makes it look a lot huger over there, like there's a bigger space than it really has. So what we can do is we can do an O times maybe 0.8, 80%. See what that looks like. Oops, and I pushed it wrong. That's why it went to 0. That's why it's so drastic of a change. Shouldn't be that drastic. Okay, so we go down and we look and see how those look, and see down there it looks pretty good. Okay, up there you can definitely tell the difference. In the middle you can't tell the difference quite so much. So it's just a trade-off. You try to make it look good at the sizes that you want. Okay, R. This one sort of depends. It can sort of act like a diagonal if it has this diagonal thing, but since this is jutting out so far, it sort of acts like a round. We're going to do that one later. That's hard. Okay, we're going to set this. What if we set this equal to O times 0.9? Okay, did I get that right? Okay, so this usually takes a little bit more than the P because since it has closer stuff, it has more activity on the right side. That looks pretty good. Let's check out the E. The E you can also make a function of H. So if we set him equal to H, then that's way too big. So let's set him equal to 50% of H and see what happens. So that's fairly decent. Just looking up here, that's not too bad. Just depends on how your E is designed. Usually the middle is going to be the farthest in here. So you can also compare that also to the T, but usually the E is going to be a little bit wider like that. And then the F is sort of a strange case where sometimes people will actually put it very narrow up there. So let's just say if we did it like let's see here, like a little bit less than half, like an 18. Or even equal to what the T is. Let's check out the T, and we'll put a bunch of T's here. We can make this a function of the lowercase t if we want to, equals lowercase t times 1.1. And then we're going to set the other side equal to the first side, so equals bar. Okay, and you can see it sort of has this look here. It's only a 16. And things are close when you put the T's next to each other, but it looks pretty good when it's just next to the H. So if you do it this way, you need to add positive kerning in later. But if you do it where it's a lot larger, like say a 24 or something, the space between the T's looks better, but now it looks a little bit spacey next to the H, and then you'd have to do negative kerning next to the H. So it's a little bit of a trade-off over there. I'm going to, since we have the sort of the tighter strategy, I'm going to do leave it back to where it was, which make it a function of t. t times 1.1. L, we can set that side also equal to t. So we get a similar thing going since it has a huge gap. That's the largest gap that we have for the uppercase, and I guess all of the letters. And so the F, you could set it equal to T, or we can make it similar to E, where we can use E times something like 0.8, which in this case is almost exactly the same thing. So we'll just leave it at 18. That looks pretty decent over there. It has a lot of space, so we'll do that. Okay, so we got the E, we got the L, so we got left. Okay, we didn't get this. So sometimes I just set this equal to E, the right side of E. So if I do that, I need bar, then E on that side. And then on the other side, I can just set equal to E because they're both the right side. So now let's see how that looks. And that's decent also. Okay, good. And also we're thinking about how close things are together, not just the area. And you can see that this is 28, 35, 22, 22. Okay, so we could add a little bit more to the Z. Let's see this one, 25, 35, 22. Let's add just a little bit onto there, like a 3 or 4 to each side. Okay, how's that look? About the same. It's going to be a little bit closer to the E spacing, but then again, the Z doesn't have the thing in the middle, so it is a little bit more open. Okay, so finishing up the spacing for the uppercase, the M and the N are tricky to design, but they're easy to space. You just set them equal to H. The C, the G, and the Q, you're going to set the left side equal to O, like we did here. And then the Q can have sometimes, and then we're going to set this that we've done the left side. The Q can be a bit tricky if this goes past the side bearing, that this goes past the round part. Then you have to do a similar thing like the J that has the part that sticks out. Another thing you can do is if this is separate like this, you can take this thing, you can cut it, and now you can do a Command-Shift-V, which pastes as another element. So what that now allows you to do is you can hit this, say it's a non-spacing element. Now this will not be put into the calculation. So if I move it over here, notice that the O didn't change. So that way if we have something, let's just make a ridiculous long thing here. See, even if I have this, the side bearing is not moving. It's staying with this up here. If I take off this non-spacing thing, then look, it moves to space from this thing down here. Okay, so if you have long tails or stuff, I'm going to undo all that. I don't like that way that looks. If you have long tails or something like that, that's how you fix it when it's two separate things. You can do it with a J where you can make it two separate things, but it doesn't look all the way good. Okay, so the Q set both sides equal to O. The C, we want to set the side maybe equal to, see how it looks. Even though this side is set equal to O, it looks like there's a huge gap there. So maybe 50% of O. So we're going to say O times 0.5. It might be too, since the O side bearings are really small, that might be going down too much. Okay, let's also put a context with the O's here, OO at OO. And the at symbol just makes it substitute whatever letter you have. Next to the H, it doesn't look too bad. Next to the O, it looks a little too close. So let's do times 0.6. So that's 60% of the side bearing. Okay. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that one. So we'll hit green on that. The G sort of depends. If the side is more straight, then you make it a function of the H. So we're going to say equals H times 0.5. If it was, well, maybe like a 0.75, because it is a pretty long part on this side. Now, if it was circular on this side, you would make it more related to the O. This is also an interesting thing because we haven't had only the D. We've been able to compare this side and this side. And you can see that when you put it between two straights, it does look too gappy on the right. And when you put it next to the O's, it looks a little too gappy on the left. So those are little things that happen, but it's you can do a little bit of like minor kerning if you are sort of perfectionistic or whatever, if you want to get that exact. Okay, so that's pretty good for the G. I'm going to push green on that. The R can be closer. So we're going to... Actually, we'll do that when we get to the V. Okay, now we're going to do the sort of the arc type of... the arch letters, rather. So the J and the U are like arches, you know, in monuments and all that. So this you want to make a function of the H, but it usually is going to be a little bit less. So it's going to do H times 0.95. You don't really want to do anything much more different than 5% or something like that. Okay, so you can tell that the space feels good, but you can tell that if you look at the big ones, you can tell, okay, this is smaller than this. But looks pretty good. So we're just going to do that. Call the U done. The J, we're just going to set the right side equal to the U. The left side can be very, for this style of J, you know, it depends on if the point of the J looks more like the L, like a blunt thing. Since this is sharp, we can make it fairly small. So let's just set equal to 0, see what happens. For a tightly spaced font, that doesn't look too bad. I would add maybe a little bit more to it. Let's try 5. Okay, we're looking pretty good. I like it next to this. With the O, we're going to need a little bit of kerning if you want to get the detail of it. But there's certain, the later letters in the alphabet were added later, some of them. So they tend to be a similar shape, such as the W was added later. The V wasn't, the U was, the J was added later. The Z comes from Greek. So some of those types of things, when they're added later like that, the forms stay the same. So that's really nice from a spacing point of view, because you can just use the space from the other letter as long as you designed it consistently and similar enough. So let's go and copy more of this here. The K, S, then V through Y. Okay, K. Let's highlight those K. Whoops. K, S, then V through Y. Okay, now I'm going to hit copy. Now I'm going to select each of those parts, and then I can just hold Command and push through there, and then do the paste. Okay, so let's set this X. Actually, let's set the side of the K first equal to H, so we don't forget that. Because that's a straight side over there, so we've done the left. Now we're going to set the X. Let's just set him equal to lowercase x. And see what happens. Now let's set this one I'm not sure about. Sometimes I put that in like a purple, magenta. The V, we can set that equal to the lowercase v, and maybe we want to add some space to these. Okay, set that. Then the W, usually we'll just set that equal to the uppercase V. That way if we change the uppercase V, any changes we make goes into there. And remember, for the uppercase as well, if you're doing a text font, we're doing a display here, but if you're doing a text font, you want the W needs to have a little bit more side bearings since the angle is more shallow compared to the V. So see how this triangle, this white triangle here changes when I go there. It shrinks up quite a bit. So if this was a text font, then I would want to add more between here. Okay, so I'm going to, let's see how that looks. Okay, so let's see next, let's I'm going to go the V. Here I might want to do context, actually, this like this, okay? So here I'm looking at these, the N's and the O's. When I push the V, now I'm sort of looking at the uppercase, and I have to sort of alternate and see if that feels right. Okay. Let's do a plus here. Let's do like a plus, +3 to the V. Okay. That gives it a little bit more of a similar look. Okay, now the W automatically changed because we did that. Okay, let's set that equal. Y just always has a lot of space next to it, so you can make this less than the V if you want, or equal the V if you want to have even space between. Sometimes I'll just leave these the same because I want to have sort of equal space in a display font between these here like that. And I want these spaces to be the same. And I'm not as concerned as much about the area, but more about the almost touching points. Okay, I'm going to hit green on that. We set W and Y equal to that. The A, we can do the similar thing. Let's turn back. If you change this up here, you have to turn back on the context. I'm just going to set that equal to V also. But here, especially if you're doing a serif, you can set it to the opposite side of the V, since it is not just flipped, but actually rotated 180 degrees. S, I would start out with making it equal to the lowercase. And then I would look up here and see how it needs more on the right. Okay, do +6. Okay, now we're going to go to a waterfall to better tell what's going on. HH at HH, OO at OO. Sometimes if you change stuff up here, the at changes to the actual symbol. We don't want that. And you can see how between the O's it's really annoying because this part looks too close, this part looks too far away if you're just looking at the round parts. But we just try to just do compromises and get it right. Okay, something like that. Okay, we're going to call that one done. Now the K and the X and the R with a diagonal like this, we're going to go to the X. We set it equal to the lowercase x. Now, so we can go to the context and sort of alternate. Here we're looking, when we're looking, have the lowercase, we're looking over here. When we have the uppercase, we're looking over here. The thing we can also do is start changing this so we can put the X down here so we can see both at the same time. Now we can look sort of back and forth. Yeah, I would still probably add a couple units over there. Oops, pushed enter too many times. Okay, we're going to set that to green. We're going to set the right side of K equal to the uppercase X. Change this back to context, actually to this so we can see what we're doing. We're going to change these X's back to, we're going to change this to the at. Okay. So looking at both sides, that looks pretty good. Wait a second here. What's going on? Something that this does feel a little bit too spacey over on this side. +2. Oh wait, this has quite a bit of positive. I'm going to take that off there. Because when you put it on the K, then you can sort of tell that the X has too much space. Looks a little spacey on that side. Let's see if we just put this to 0. See what happens. Looks better to me. Let's try setting this equal to 0. Maybe we set all the X's equal to 0. let's go down here. Let's put this to 0 on the X. We want to also, I haven't been doing any testing with words. That's not so good. It's good to test with words. Okay, so this is what it looks like if we use a test word. You can also go change your text. Go into preferences, texts, and I've added a lot of different things that I have up here. It comes with, I think, the basic Latin one. And then from the panel, you can push texts, and then that will appear up here. Okay, let me type in hamburger font sieve again, which has a lot of the different shapes. Caps lock. Okay, so that's what we look like right now. Whoops, my bad. Now suppose we wanted it to be narrower or wider spacing. Well, all we have to do, the reason why I use metrics links, all we have to do is just change this number, and it changes just about everything. Now, so that's one way, and this also helps you check to make sure your metrics links are right. If we also made the O a function of the N, then changing the N would change everything. Now let's put this back up to 40 and to 37, like we had it. Okay, another thing we can do to check this out, or to do this step faster, is open up this in the font window, the sidebar, the right sidebar, and then hit the gear, and then check left side bearing and right side bearing. Once you have those, and these are, you can input into here, so we could also input things like that, and also to check to make sure everything looks good. Like the O and the N should be the only ones, the main ones that just have a value like that. The S, the basic shapes that don't have any references. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Another way that you can check it is you can go over to here, and instead of the name, you can put it to the right side bearing or the left side bearing, and then that gives you an idea. So left side bearing, these shapes should be about the same. You can sort of check it out there. Now, another thing that's great about doing it this way with the metrics links is if I take this and I copy this over, copy this Command C, now I go to a different font. Oops, sometimes it does that. Okay, so I go to a different font and I highlight the uppercase. If I push Option Command V and then check off contours and images, and just do the left and the right side bearings, and leave this unchecked, push OK. Now all the references are copied over. Look at that. Well, showing everything. But it gives you an idea that the references are copied over, and then I can do that over here. Command C, Option Command V, paste it. Now that's changed. So once you follow this video and you've done it once, you can now use this for other fonts. Now, obviously, if the shapes change, you have to tweak the formulas a bit. Like if this G was well, this is a different type of G anyways, so this one might need a little bit more spacing. If you had a G that had a round right side, then that would need less spacing. So you do have to adjust your side bearings based on the font that you're using and use your eye, but that will give you a great starting point. Okay, that is it. That is how you space all the uppercase and lowercase. Numbers, a little bit trickier. You do it in a similar way. If you're interested in me doing one for numbers, then let me know, and I'll do that. And for spacing, punctuation, all those other things. Take care. Dave Lawrence, California Type Foundry.